My father died almost a year ago. I saw his body at an open casket. Yet, now, I hear his voice echoing through a chamber deep underground. I could kill you now, but what fun would that be, when I still have such wonders to show you? I've seen a few of those wonders, and I don't want to see any more. I chided myself for missing all the signs of the dangerous path he'd embarked on years ago. New stories about government investigations into experiments conducted by his company, reports of missing construction workers, and how he seemed to get places far apart at extraordinary speeds. As part of his conditions for not killing us right away by cutting off the air supply, he has demanded that I periodically stop to write up what I've been through. I won't review your notes until this is over, my father's voice had said from the speaker. But I have access to your iPad and will regularly upload what you write so the others can verify that you are being thorough. I want to have a record of how you and your friends react to my facility and the defenses within it. You may as well get a look at what I spent you and your brother's inheritances on, my little bird. Let me back up. In the spirit of being thorough, I'll start with this morning. I woke up with a throbbing headache and carefully avoided the many obstacles our celebration has left strewn over the floor and furniture. Red cups, empty beer cans, and the sleeping forms of my friends and my little brother, Mason. I'm normally a bit straight-laced, but I'd partied hard the night before and even discreetly slipped away with 2 six-packs of beer from the 7-Eleven where I worked to contribute to the festivities. Mason had returned from his first year of college the day before. It was a feat none of us had accomplished, and we all rooted for him to obtain a degree and make it out of our dreary town. I took a look at my peacefully slumbering brother before shaking him awake. He had an inquisitive spirit and the same slim build and wavy ash-brown hair as his father. The 5-year gap between us was significant, in that it meant that I retained extensive memories of my late mother, who I more resembled, while many of his relatively few recollections of her relented to the aftermath of the accident that killed her. Her absence, coupled with our eccentric father's behavior and lack of interest in child rearing, meant that I had to do most of the work raising him. Of course, Mason was no child anymore. The drinking games we played last night confirmed he was much more experienced in many areas than I was at his age. But our father's recent death cemented that I still had a major role in looking after him. I suppose stealing beer for him while his 2 years shy of the legal drinking age may not have been a shining moment in the parental element of our relationship, but I shrugged it off. I still had a role to play as his cool older sister. With great effort, I rallied him and my 4 friends together for the day trip we had planned. Joe helped me load our gear into his rundown SUV, which had been in its last leg since his parents bought it used in the late 90s, and we headed off with him at the wheel. "Where are we going, exactly?" yawned Mason, a few hours later upon waking from his nap. "We're doing some urban exploration," I told him. "The rest of us were going anyway, and you said you wanted to tag along." "I did?" he asked. Joe laughed. "Do you remember anything about our plan today? Or why we're doing it?" Please say yes, I thought, hoping to avoid Joe redelivering his self-righteous screed. "No," said Mason. I sighed. Let me start from the beginning. I've been into urban exploration for a long time. The last few years, I've been making unauthorized visits to a particular set of locations, and Nicole and Aisha, motioning to 2 women my age, resting in each other's arms in the back seat. Nicole had served in the Army Reserves, and she'd been with Aisha for over 2 years. Aisha had a mousy demeanor, and I met Nicole at a midnight screening at the local movie theater, where Aisha had worked before the pandemic had shut it down. "Nicole used to work in construction around the northwest of the state," said Joe. "She got wind of all sorts of private projects that piqued our interest. Lots of money being spent by rich people, many from tech companies out in Silicon Valley, to build massive structures in the middle of nowhere. The 3 of us got curious when site after site remained abandoned even after construction was complete." So?" he continued. We did a bit of sneaking around after hours. At first we didn't understand why such nice buildings were unoccupied. We'd hoped someone was investigating the region. But it became apparent to us pretty quickly what was really going on when we saw how deep they went into the ground. These were doomsday bunkers for the ultra-wealthy. Doomsday bunkers? Repeated Mason. Yep, said Cheyenne, who stretched back in the seat across from Mason. She brushed several strands of faded dyed hair from her face as she sat upright. She was between the ages of Mason and the rest of us. I joined Joe, Nicole, and Aisha after they told me about all these shelters for selfish assholes. These guys spent millions that could go towards any number of good causes on ensuring their own safety and the small chance that society collapses. Wait, says Mason. You're saying they spent a fortune on building something that probably won't even be used? Yeah, said Joe. They have the money lying around and just seeing it like another insurance policy. Some of these places are huge. Helicopter pads, elevators, smart TVs, even indoor cinemas. Each one is a waste of tens of millions of dollars, said Cheyenne. These buildings could be used to house the homeless or provide a place for orphan children or people facing eviction to stay. Heck, these could even be shelters for stray dogs. The guys who built them, though, couldn't care less about any of that. We've broken into a dozen of them now, said Joe. I even dragged your sister along for the last one. I tagged along with maybe a third of their expeditions, and that was the only time I'd visited an apocalypse bunker with them. What do you do there? Asked Mason. Cheyenne giggled and motioned like she was chugging a beer. I rolled my eyes. The headache I still had from last night made me never want to drink again. There's some of that, said Joe, but our main goal is to disrupt the place. Disrupt? Asked Mason. Cut wires, break computer systems, mess with the air conditioning, that kind of thing. Whatever we can get away with without alerting anyone to come investigate, says Joe. We figure, if some societal collapse really does happen, maybe they'll have less of an advantage as a result. That's a nice sentiment, Joe, said Cheyenne with a sly smile. But honestly, after what our town's been through, I think we all just like the feeling of breaking shit that belongs to people who don't deserve it. Your sister, said Joe, wasn't comfortable with what we were doing at first, but with a little encouragement, she left a real mark at the last site. I nodded as I cringed at Mason's image of me as the responsible one took yet another hit. After a couple shots of the crappy vodka Aisha had brought along, I'd emptied several cans of spray paint all over the once spotless survival facility built by a social media executive. And, continued Joe, our destination today was her idea. Whose bunker are we going to? Asked Mason. You were all excited about it last night, kiddo, I said, laughing. After the accident, I got a look at a lot of Dad's finances. I realized quickly where much of the money went. Business had always kept my dad occupied, such that we rarely saw him, and when we did, he tended to be dismissive towards me, always referring to me by my infant nickname, Little Bird, and only showing real interest in Mason. When I got wind of the helicopter crash, I had to have Mason pulled out of class and give him the news personally. The ensuing responsibilities hit me far harder than grief. I'd expected that we'd inherit a fortune, given our father's luxurious lifestyle. Instead, I discovered that he'd squandered his wealth and left us with severe debts. Before long, we had virtually nothing to our names aside from the house, which bankruptcy rules allows us to keep. If we sold it, the proceeds would go to his creditors. Digging through his financial documents, I found multiple references to massive investments and payments regarding a property in the same area as the doomsday shelters Nicole had told me about. It seemed that Dad had chosen a survivalist bunker over leaving a fund for his children. Mason had sighed when I explained this to him. He'd been closer to our father than me, but since the accident, he'd steadily grown disenchanted upon recognizing the dire straits in which his behavior had left us. It's just like him, he mumbled, prioritizing wacky conspiracy theories over his family. I expected that my goal was to see how much of the bunker could be liquidated and sold, and that while my friends were tagging around out of interest, I'd prohibited them from vandalizing or interfering with what we found without my permission. We finally pulled up at a small farmhouse at the address listed on the documents I'd examined. It was isolated and surrounded by a barn, empty fields, woods, and a distant river. We got out of the car and stretched our legs in the cool fall air. Joe placed the car keys on the passenger side wheel. He proceeded to light himself a cigarette and offered me one, but Mason's presence encouraged me to turn him down. "This doesn't look like a bunker," said Mason. "We've seen it before," said Nicole. "These executives imagine mobs prowling for resources. They like to keep their bunkers hidden underneath decoy locations. We even found one under a fake parking garage," said Aisha. "Well, found is pushing it." Nicole knew where it was because she'd helped install it. "I'm honestly kind of shocked I haven't died in a mysterious accident at this point, given how many of these bunkers I know about," laughed Nicole, as she attached her sheathed army knife to her belt. "Though, not this one. Your dad didn't involve our company or any that I know of." "We'll start with the barn," said Joe, discarding his cigarette on the asphalt driveway. "Take this," I said, tossing Mason a small pack from the trunk. Like the others, it contained a set of supplies Joe, Aisha, Nicole, and Cheyenne had accumulated for urban exploration over the years: an LED flashlight, glow sticks, a walkie-talkie, and a small amount of emergency food and water. Nicole kept a first aid kit in hers, and Joe's also contained a hammer, gloves, and some duct tape for breaking glass. I checked for the iPad in my pack, which I kept secret in a thick and waterproof case. For obvious reasons, my friends typically didn't make any record of what they did or the vandalism they committed, but I'd already explained to them that I needed to take notes of what I saw. The barn was as nondescript as the farmhouse it bordered, but Nicole quickly identified something abnormal about it. "I grew up in a place like this," she said, "and the fencing around the pigsty is all wrong. No one could see a pig escape from it. But a predator could easily get in." We searched around it until we noticed a clump of dirt that didn't quite match its surroundings. Joe, Mason, and I proceeded to brush the dirt away until we identified a few inches underneath it a circular metal door displaying across its surface: Abernathy Industries. Apparently, my dad's ego couldn't resist attaching his brands to the entrance of an apocalypse bunker. "Found it," said Joe. But how do we open it?" asked Aisha. I noted a screen attached to the door, covered in a thin layer of plastic that contained an outline of a hand. I removed the plastic and placed my right hand over the screen. It made an angry, high-pitched sound as the words "half match, no entry" displayed. What did it mean, half match? Joe placed his hand on the next, resulting in the same outcome, albeit with the words "no match" displayed. "Let me try," said Mason. When he removed his hand, the screen turned green and read, "Full match. Access granted." The hatch opened. "Looks like your dad had a favorite child," teased Cheyenne. I ignored her. One by one, we climbed down a short ladder into a compact structure. The door was slammed shut behind us, but there was another handprint pad on the inside that would allow us to exit. Nicole flipped a light switch, revealing a living room with a couch and television, a small kitchen, a desk bordered by a bookshelf, a bathroom, a generator, and a pantry stocked with canned food. "Dang, how did your dad waste so much money on this shithole?" asked Cheyenne. "Our usual alterations would practically be an improvement." "I don't think this is it," I said, similarly underwhelmed. "There's more to it, I guarantee you." We explored the small bunker and relaxed for a minute. Aisha opened a container of gin in the pantry and took a shot with Cheyenne, who then complained about the limited channels on the television and how her phone had no service. "Anyone bringing you weed?" she asked. Aisha apologetically explained what was left over from last night would still be at my place. Mason looked at the bookcase while Joe and I knocked on the walls and the floor for any unusual echoes that could indicate hidden areas. "There's something odd about the walls here," said Joe. I brushed my hand against the bland beige paint in the area he pointed to, and I also noticed a change in the texture behind it. "It's like there's a metal plating behind this area alone," I said. Suddenly, the metal receded, leaving what felt like merely a thin layer of wood, only to then slide back into place. Looking for the cause of the change, I noticed Mason fumbling with books on the shelf. After a bit of trial and error, we realized that pulling back a copy of Atlas Shrugged, Aisha pretended to vomit upon hearing the name, functioned to remove the metal barrier. With it out of the way, Joe tore through the thin layer of wood with his hammer. Nicole and I helped him clear the way into another room behind it. In contrast to the dingy wood and plaster that lined the small bunker we just entered, the room we had uncovered was built with clean steel and concrete. Several electronic panels were attached to its walls. In its center was another hatch downward, its shiny surface well lit by fluorescent light bulbs. "So, we were just in a decoy doomsday bunker," said Nicole. "Now that's a new one." Whatever lay below, I was sure, was the product of an untold fortune spent by my father. I needed to discover what it was, and my friends weren't about to leave without exploring it. 2 buttons were connected to this hatch, and they simply read, "Open and close." I pushed the first to startling effect. Several things happened at once. The hatch slowly opened. As it did so, the panels surrounding us emitted red lights from all directions that moved over each of our bodies. To top all of it off, a recording of a familiar voice played throughout the room. "Welcome to safety. Welcome to comfort. Welcome to security. Welcome to Abernathy City." A corny jazz tune played in the background as he spoke. "That's Dad's voice," said Mason. I'm sure I looked as perplexed as he did. And Abernathy City? What the hell was this place? "I am Mason Abernathy Sr., our dad's voice continued. "If you are here, some catastrophe or series of catastrophes has broken down society. You have followed the radio and internet messages I have sent out signaling this is a safe location. You have entered the hatch I have left open for new arrivals, and you are searching for a place where you can help build a better society than the one that failed you. It is important to remember," continued my father in a soothing voice, "that you are wanted here. There is a place for you here. The ID cards you are about to receive will guide you to that place. Please, proceed to one of the floors listed, and you will soon be part of a vibrant and supportive community." The red lights faded along with my dad's voice. The hatch was fully open. Meanwhile, some kind of small printer spat out 6 ID cards, one for each of us. I examined mine. It displayed a picture of me, followed by my full name, Robin Marie Abernathy, and the words Access B5. In similar print, it contained my criminal history, which somehow included more than any records I know of would reflect. Not just my single speeding ticket, but also the one time I'd gotten in a fight in middle school, and even the beer I'd shoplifted last night, which no one should have already noticed had gone missing. Finally, it listed detailed jargon regarding my physical and mental health. "How do they know all this stuff about my health conditions?" asked Cheyenne. "I don't give anyone permission to share any of the shit listed here." Her and Joe's card gave access to B1, Mason's gave access to B3 through 4, and B6 through 7. Nicole gave access to B2, and Aisha's, like mine, gave access to B5. I slipped my card into my backpack and followed the others down the hatch. Joe used several glow sticks to illuminate the large room in which we arrived in eerie green light. It resembled a fancy corporate lobby with a floor of luxury vinyl tile. The words, "New arrivals, please use the stairs," were printed above a door in the back. Next to it was an elevator that appeared inoperative. I shined my flashlight on a chart next to it, which listed the floors as follows. L. Sorting. B1. Materials. B2. Refinery. B3. Plaza. B4. Manor. B5. Med Rep. B6. Lab. B7. Hub Hydro. "This place is huge," said Joe. "I've never seen more than 4 underground floors before, and I've got a feeling the floor beneath us is going to be much larger than those we've seen in the past." "What is that?" said Aisha. She had her flashlight aimed at something on the ceiling. The green light revealed it as shaded, a peculiar, translucent black and white. It appeared like an image from an old film reel, and that its pulsating circular form seems to only half exist in the tangible reality we occupied. It was shaped vaguely like a spider, but with multiple insectoid heads divided by appendages that encircled its body. It was about the size of Aisha, who was the smallest of us. "The fuck?" said Cheyenne. The creature appeared to be resting. It made a low grumbling sound, after which an aperture formed in the middle of its body. A gunky substance dropped out of it onto the floor at Aisha's feet. Aisha shrieked and leapt back. I crouched to get a closer look at the pile of goo. Much of it had the same translucent quality as the creature itself, but several white fragments within it were opaque. I brought my flashlight close and nearly dropped it when I realized what they were. Fractured pieces of human jaw. "What the hell went on here?" said Joe. "We need to leave." We turned to flee, only to stop when we heard scurrying sounds and saw white beams traveling through the hallway behind us like searchlights. This place was supposed to be unoccupied. What had we stumbled into? "Whatever's here is searching for us," I whispered, realizing they likely heard Aisha's scream. "I don't know about all of you, but I don't want it to find us." Looking for cover, I spotted a door marked Custodial Supplies. Maybe we could hide in here, but what if it was locked? I turned the handle. To my relief, the door eased open. "This way," I whispered. Then I realized that an immense pressure pushed the door from the other side. I tried to hold it back, but it was too much. All at once, dozens and dozens of human bones crashed out the custodial door. Collarbones, ribs, and skulls cascaded across the lobby. Mixed within them were glasses, tattered remains of clothing, and the same slimy substance the creature had expelled. The disturbing sight rendering most of us too dumbfounded and shocked to think. Luckily, Nicole remained level-headed. "Come on, let's try the stairs, fast," she said, snapping me out of my daze. The lights closed in on us as we ran. Joe held open the door as we shuffled into the staircase. The door shook moments after it shut. Joe held his broad body against it, holding our pursuers at bay as the rest of us descended. We arrived at a door marked B1. "Hide in there," said Joe. "I'll hold this door as long as I can." Cheyenne held her card up to a small scanner. The door unlocked, and we followed her inside. I rolled several glow sticks into the dark room. What appeared to be a security station lay before us. To the left was an open guard station, and to the right was a pathway through some kind of scanning device that led to the entrance of a large room marked Materials. A sign directed new arrivals to obey staff instructions. Cheyenne, eager to escape whatever was pursuing us, ran ahead. "Hold up, let's be careful," called Nicole. To no avail. Cheyenne continued to hurry away from the staircase. The moment Cheyenne entered the scanning area, glass doors descended rapidly from the ceiling and shut on every side of her. "Oh shit," she said as she futilely tried to escape them. We all tried to help her, but the glass appeared reinforced and resisted every attempt we made to smash into it. Another recording of my father's voice began to play, backed by the same innocuous jazz music. "This is Mason Abernathy Sr., bearing unfortunate news for you. In other circumstances, I would greet you warmly and welcome you as our contributor to an important function of our self-sufficient society. However, my test runs repeatedly found the unskilled manual labor pool to squander resources and produce, shall I say, unfortunate inefficiencies. These problems became more glaring when I identified a cheaper, less demanding form of labor. I'm afraid there is simply no role for one of your limited skill sets in the society that is to come. But I encourage you to spend your last moments soothing yourself with the knowledge that our new society will be stronger, freer, and healthier with you removed from it. There is no greater sacrifice than one made in the name of progress.
Last moments? Oh God, screamed Cheyenne. We're going to find a way to get you out of here, I said, only to quickly wish I hadn't. I had no idea how to help her. The red lights from the scanner changed form. They looked sharper now, more like lasers than scanners. The lasers turned off as each scanner repositioned. Then they simultaneously flashed on again in such a way that all 4 shot beams of red energy directly into the location of her heart. Cheyenne only had time to make a brief whimper before she collapsed. I instinctively grabbed onto Mason like he was still an easily traumatized child. Nicole and Aisha held on to each other, the latter covering her eyes. The floor to the scanning area opened, revealing a step passage below, which Cheyenne's body slipped away into the darkness. The doors to the chamber opened and the room returns to normal. It bore no indication that Cheyenne had even been in here. "We're getting out of here, right now," said my brother, pulling away from me and running towards the guard station to the elevator shaft. I followed him. "The elevator didn't work before," I said. "And even if it brings you back to the lobby, whatever we're searching for us could still be there." He pressed a button, and this time the elevator responded. "I know," he said, "but it's probably still trying to break through the door to the staircase. Right now is our best chance to get out." The elevator door opened, revealing a sight that shocked me profoundly. It was my father, but also something else. It had a half-dozen long arms that resembled the appendages of the creature we saw in the lobby, but a human form with one face, a face I had seen my whole life. The unnatural, slimy limbs wrapped around Mason and pulled him inside before he could react. "See you later, little bird," said this thing that resembled my dad as a twisted smile spread across his face. The door shut just as I reached it, and all the remains of Mason was his backpack on the floor. I felt a painful thud followed by the cold floor against my face. I awoke sometime later to find Aisha sitting over me. "She's awake," she called. We were in the corner of the B1 room, and I surmised that I'd fainted, but only lost consciousness for a few minutes. Nicole came over to greet me. "We were so worried. I think it was just too much for you." My dad's voice cut her off. "Now that my daughter is awake, I'd like to have a few words with you all." I sat up, alarmed. Luckily, my dad, or whatever I'd seen on the elevator, was not in the room with us. We were merely hearing his voice over the intercom again, though this time, not as a recording. "It pleases me, Robin, that you have brought Mason to me. I know you want him back. He is your only way out, after all." Dad, or whoever this was right. If the hatch to the decoy bunker was the only entrance, we needed Mason's handprints to escape. "Nobody has escaped from here before. Not the construction workers, not the test subjects, not even my business associates. But you were always capable of occasional competence. Half of you is me, after all. I could kill you now, but what fun would that be, when I still have such wonders to show you? I'll give you a fighting chance. Things in Abernathy City have not gone entirely to plan. Perhaps my method of securing ideal laborers could have used further refinement before implementation. I have produced a facility conducive to the self-sufficient society I want. One without any interference by those who do not understand the power of unrestricted human ingenuity. Please, explore it. You'll probably die, but if you make it down here fast enough, you and your friends may even be able to escape with your brother. No promises, though." He cackled, as if he had said something amusing. He proceeded to instruct us to keep regular track of where we entered on my iPad as a condition for not using his control of the air system to kill us instantly, along with a caveat that he would delete any information that confirmed our location and would alter mentions of last names. I'll cause the iPad to buzz when I want a new entry. Don't worry. I won't do that at any unfair time. That's all, Robin. Good luck. We sat in silence for a few moments, digesting what had just taken place. The apparent death of our friend, the disappearance of Joe. He hasn't caught up to us, and Nicole found the staircase abandoned upon revisiting it. The otherworldly creatures and whatever was impersonating my father. I'd seen his body at an open casket. How could he be talking to us now? I don't want to know the answers to all these questions, even as I have a sinking feeling that I'm going to discover them regardless. I just want to rescue my brother and leave. My iPad buzzed, so I've typed this out so that my father, or whatever is talking to us, can do what he wants with us. Nicole, Aisha, and I are headed out now to search for Mason and Joe, and I could only hope we all make it out of this hellhole alive. We looked over the floor chart outside the elevator on B1 as we planned our next move. This place obviously took years for my dad to construct. How long had he kept this a secret from all of us? The funny thing about my dad is that he kept so much hidden while never letting us have secrets of our own. I'd kept a diary for a few years as a kid, but stopped after Dad let slip several comments that revealed that he'd been discreetly reading it. Now, it turns out that the business trips that had kept him absent for so much of me and Mason's childhood were, in fact, clandestine expeditions to build his fantasy world. It was in character that he had illicitly obtained a vast trove of private medical information in his ideal world. He alone will get to have all the secrets. The elevator stopped here before it became inoperative, said Nicole, pointing to the spot for B7. Great, I said. The only way out is to find Mason, and the only way to find Mason is to go all the way down. We needed to figure out what happened to Joe, too. Hopefully we can ride the elevator back out again once we get them. Once we get them? Repeated Aisha. I wish I had your confidence. There are a lot of things in here that I don't think want us to get out. I'm still processing what happened to Cheyenne. I understand, I said. But if we don't hurry, the same thing is guaranteed to happen to us. We have to keep going and not give up. I recommended that we take the stairs down to the bottom, but Nicole reminded me that none of us had access to B7, at least from the doors that connected to the staircase. Your card only grants you access to B2, and both of you only have access to B5, said Nicole. If we're going to make it down, we'll have to find another way. I wasn't enticed by the idea of entering either floor we had access to directly from the staircase after what happened to Cheyenne. Aisha showed me a small floor map she'd found of B1 and B2 while I was out. She motioned to a shape marked as supply shaft on B1 in the room with materials written over the entrance. If it's large enough, she said, we can use this slide to get down to B2 without getting through the front door. We maneuvered through the security station, avoiding the sensor area that had killed Cheyenne. We took our backpacks of supplies with us, as well as the one Mason had left behind. As we approached the materials room, I heard the creak of a door behind us. In the light of a glow stick we'd left behind, a handle slowly turned. We're being followed, I whispered. We rushed into the room. The first thing we saw was a stream of running water. The map says this is the highest of a series of interconnected aquifers that run parallel to the facility. I think they eventually connect to the river we saw outside, said Aisha. Part of the water ran by an enclosed area marked livestock. As we scurried past it, we noticed that the animals within it were grotesquely deformed. A chicken had 2 heads. A greenish material coated 3 pigs in one form with a bizarre oval-shaped center that exuded a murky goo that formed a puddle within which their legs seemed stuck. Their squeals were contorted and uneven. We need to pass through here, directed Aisha, leading us into an arboretum brightly lit by LED grow lights. The area had a sour quality to it, and the plants looked unnaturally tangled. The substance left by the creatures extended across different plants, seemingly joining them together. Watch out! Nicole yelled, grabbing her girlfriend and pulling her back just as a plant swung what looked like a particularly thorny vine. It barely missed Aisha. What was that? asked Aisha. "We're taking a detour out of here." I tried to follow them, only to gag and fall backwards. I felt myself dragging across the slimy floor, through dirt, and over a series of peppers and cannabis leaves. I tried to call for my friends, but an appendage covered my mouth. I desperately bit into it and found myself surrounded by vile, discolored plants that towered over me. The appendage emanated a liquid substance that ran into my throat. I gagged again as I accidentally swallowed some of it. The leaves, branches, and appendages of the plants around me began to take misshapen, anthropomorphic forms. One that resembled a white lily flower mumbled incoherently. An aloe vera twisted its jagged leaves as it repeated in an androgynous voice, "Sorry, sorry, sorry." An enormous Venus flytrap opened its mouth as it waddled towards me. Each side of its sticky leaves vaguely resembled a human face, but the proportions were all wrong. "Drink the blood, ease the suffering," said one through its gaping mouth. "Come, tend the garden with us," said the other. The liquid started to have an effect on me. I felt light and relaxed. Vines continued to wrap around me as the fly trap slowly approached, but I did not feel threatened and stopped resisting. In the calmness that followed, my mind drifted. When I was younger, Nicole and I had often broken into empty buildings on our walks back from school, and each wave of layoffs that hit the town created more places to explore. I found myself giggling with a 10-year-old Nicole outside an empty home we'd declared our headquarters. Over several weeks, we carried in patchy furniture we'd found by trash cans on the neighborhood streets and created our own imaginary land to rule over within the vacant walls. In the evening, I laid on the floor with her, and as we gazed at the stars through a hole in the ceiling. "There's so much out there I'll never see," said Nicole. "All I want is to get out of this dying town and explore some of it." "What, and leave me behind?" I responded, finding offensive. "Your family should have left here ages ago," said Nicole. "Your dad can look after whatever business interest he has in the region from somewhere else. You need to beg him to take Mason and you and leave." "But I'd miss you," I said. "I'd miss you too," said Nicole. "But I'd rather us miss each other if it meant that you could go live your life somewhere better. I'm stuck here, but at least then I could imagine myself in your place." A hazy figure interrupted my fantasy as she jabbed a long knife into one of the lobes of the flying trap, which hovered less than a foot from my face. It emitted a loud, high-pitched squeal as the thick, dark red substance leaked out of it. Vine-like appendages retracted as it retreated. Nicole picked up her knife from where it had fallen and used it to hack away at my remaining binds. Aisha gripped me from behind and pulled me back out to the pathway. The appendage dropped out of my mouth. My sense of pain and my muscle control slowly returned. "I'm so sorry I'm still here," I said to Nicole. "What the hell are you talking about?" said Nicole. "She's not thinking straight," said Aisha. "I was supposed to leave." They dragged me against a wall as my mind regained its sense of reality. "Those plants, they were like combined with people," I stuttered. "They certainly bled like people," said Nicole. She helped me up and confirmed that I was thinking straight again. We didn't have time to reflect further on what happened and continued searching for the supply shaft. We passed a cramped area marked quarters that consisted of tiny slabs of stone before arriving at the foot of a long cave that resembled a mine. This area was covered with the creatures that resembled the organism we found on the lobby ceiling, as well as swampy puddles of the secretion it left behind. "There it is," said Aisha, pointing to a metal slide down which rocks brought to it by the creatures fell to be too. It was large enough for us to use. We moved cautiously, cognizant of the danger posed by the creatures, even as these ones thus far seemed to ignore us in the favor of their tasks. I looked over my shoulder to confirm that our pursuers hadn't found us. One of the creatures rolled several pieces of dark ore towards the slide. It stumbled weakly before diving into a deposit of the sludge. When it emerged from it, it regained a translucent quality that made it virtually impossible to see. Though from the glimpses I caught, it seemed stronger and more agile. I quickly lost track of it as it hopped back into the deep end of the mine. "I see you're admiring my new laborers," rang out my dad's voice across the intercom. "I built in this location many miles from the sides of my friend's shelters, both because of the neighboring water supply and also because I discovered that the ground here contained trace elements of extraterrestrial origin ripe for study and experimentation." Extraterrestrial? A few hours ago I would have laughed at such a comment, but then again, a few hours ago I didn't even expect to even hear my dad's voice again. "These creatures, who I call the Chindra, crashed here several geographic periods ago," my dad continued. "They remained stuck in a form of stasis until I broke into their ship. The Chindra have a connection to their queen that I don't fully understand, but I do know that the queen merely needs to think up a command for them, and they follow it. So I had my scientists discreetly perform a bit of an operation on me. An operation that involved a substance inherent to the creature's biological structures that, among other properties, can, under the right conditions, combine different living beings into one. It took several tries to get the procedure right, but clones like me are discardable." Clones? I thought. No wonder the government kept trying to investigate my dad's companies. Finally, it worked, and one clone was able to survive the operation and combine with the body of the queen we found on the ship. You are listening to that clone right now. I immediately thought of the implications. This man was a clone of my father, and my real father had died, right? Or what if the man I saw in the casket was also a clone, and my real father was still alive somewhere? "I now have permanent, total control over my laborers," said my dad's voice. "Technology and automation play critical roles in running Abernathy City, but the society I want to preside over is one to which living beings contribute, and the Chindra are ideal for the role I have found for them. They can complete many physical tasks at my command, from building concealed exhaust pipes to collecting raw materials to developing metal supports for extending and reinforcing the structure of the facility. I was able to easily create a supply of food for them, and they work hard without sickness, breaks, or complaints. You have no idea how much Abernathy City has gained by replacing its unskilled human laborers with them. Of course, there are some downsides. A tiny number, around 1%, of the Chindra lack a mental connection to the Queen. They act independently and, in the process, have wreaked havoc on several parts of the facility. I believe you saw one in the lobby. It ate much of our staff on that level. But no matter. I have developed a team of hunters to combat them, and the discarded employees are replaceable. Oh, and by the way, I have also assigned the hunters to pursue you as a training exercise. On that note, the only one of you who seems equipped to handle yourself in a fight, Nicole, I believe, may want to duck. Nicole sprang to the floor just as a blast sprayed into the wall behind her. My father laughed as the speaker cut off. Aisha and I followed Nicole's example. The two of us landed in a pool of the substance left by the Chindra. I scooped it up and spread it over my body. "I think they won't be able to see us so long as this covers us," I whispered to confused Aisha. "You need to move quickly." Luckily, Aisha appeared to have listened to my advice and fled while camouflaged, as the shells only hit the gooey substance and the surface underneath. I held my breath as the figures mumbled something to each other. "Oh no," I thought, as they attached pairs of advanced-looking goggles to their faces. One of them scanned the room until he found me and raised his weapon. Joe emerged from behind the man and shoved him to the ground. "Run!" he yelled, as the two struggled. I watched as Nicole and then the barely visible, frail form of Aisha sprang down the slide. I leapt from the same destination as more shots, presumably from the other two hunters, echoed throughout the cavernous room before I awkwardly tumbled to the next level. The room below was loud and also filled with the Chindra. Above me, several operated a furnace while others guided molten metal into massive ladles. I looked down at myself. I was largely visible again. The fall down the slide had scraped off most of the substance and left me with several bruises. I needed to move, something Nicole and Aisha appeared to have done already. But what would I do next? I had no way to get to B3 from here. The only thing I could think of was to reach a staircase, use my pass to get to B5, and hope there was a way to enter that didn't cause me to meet the same fate as Cheyenne. I jumped over an assembly line on which a combination of automated machinery and alien creatures assembled food, clothing, and other products. I found myself by a tarp that blocked off an area with a horrendous odor. I peeked inside and nearly vomited at what I saw. Piles of dozens and dozens of human bodies, as well as sets of bones stripped of their flesh. A tiny opening in the dirt wall on the other side led to rapidly flowing water, a small stream of which funneled into a trough from which the Shindra sipped. The creatures climbed over the bodies. Their mouths rotated, taking turns grabbing and chewing bites of human meat. Several of the bodies belonging to powerful-looking men in suits. Many more wore construction helmets and vests. I dropped to my knees when I recognized Cheyenne's limp form among them. Aisha crept up to me. "Get up. We have to keep moving," she whispered. As with me, the fall had stripped away most of the ooze, rendering her almost fully visible again. I nodded, glad one of my friends had found me. "I saw. In there." "I know she's in there," she said. "But like you said, we have to keep going and not give up." She reached over her hands to help me to my feet. I smiled, only for her blood to spray over my face as a shell crashed into her upper arm. I ran to help her, but she begged me through her tears and gritted teeth to run. I did, and watched from behind a stack of crates as one of the men subdued and searched her. He found her ID card, and after examining it, bandaged her wound, picked her up, and carried her out of sight. Sweat had soaked through my clothes as my heart beat furiously. I was in great danger, as well as shocked at what I'd just witnessed. At least my dad's men had stopped the bleeding. I would have to find and free Aisha later. I crept low to the ground around the indifferent alien creatures while trying to suppress the image of them chomping away at the remains of Cheyenne. I searched the room for an exit, but instead found Nicole wrestling with one of the men who had followed us down, right by the foot of the slide we'd taken. He threw Nicole against a stack of cartons, but she kicked his feet, causing him to lose balance and drop his shotgun. Nicole pulled it away, but before she could use it, the man whipped a sidearm out of its holster and aimed it at her. "Now," said the masked man. "Tell me where your friends are, and I'll make this quick." I instantly recognized his voice. He, too, was a clone of my dad. How many clones did he make? Were they the only ones running this place? Before he could respond, and before I could intervene, Joe yelled down at him. "One of them's up here!" He kicked the massive ladle of molten metal such that its contents rained down on the hunter, who screamed as his body and the floor underneath him disintegrated. What remained of his lifeless form dropped to the surface below. I ran up to Nicole and hugged her. Joe hopped down and joined us. "Thank God you two are all right," said Nicole. "And Joe, it looks like you've made us a passage to the next level." The distance to the surface below was substantial, but I felt certain that we could find a way to make it down safely. The security man had left behind a pair of the goggles I'd seen earlier. I scooped them up and put them in my backpack. I then gave Nicole the bad news. "I have to tell you, Nicole. One of them took Aisha away. She's hurt, too." Nicole's face reddened. She picked up the hunter's shotgun and angrily pumped it as I heard a distant sound on the far end of the room. I identified its source. It derived from the third hunter, who watched us from an elevated area near the tarp-covered room of corpses. He removed his mask and looked directly at me. He, too, was unmistakably a clone of my father. He held a grenade in his hand, and I realized that I'd heard him remove the pin. He smiled menacingly as he drew his arm back to throw the grenade at the three of us. "Nicole," I blurted out. "The last one! He's in the corner by the tarp!" Nicole's military instincts kicked in. She spotted him, lifted her shotgun, and rapidly fired twice. Blood spurted from his shoulder as he dropped the grenade, which rolled behind the tarp. He frantically dived after it. It took me only a moment to realize why he tried to retrieve it rather than run to safety. A deep rumbling sound followed that of the explosion.
"Oh God," I said.
"What is it?"
asked Joe.
"The water." I didn't need to complete my sentence, as Nicole and Joe got the point immediately. A massive cascade of water swept the tarp away and overtook the room, toppling everything in its path and expanding the size of the hole created by the molten metal. The bodies, many half-eaten, were swept away, along with all the creatures in the area. I held onto a metal beam until it, too, detached from the surface. I took a deep breath as the waves of liquid plunged me through the opening into the level below. I remember falling, rolling off a soft flap and sinking into several meters of water, where the torso of one of the dead hunters impeded my attempts to swim to the surface. When I finally pushed it aside and reached the air above, I gasped and made my way to the nearest non-submerged surface, which I recognized as the top of an arcade claw machine. Luckily, in terms of avoiding electrical shock, it was powered off, like the rest of the devices in my immediate surroundings. I catch my breath. I grow cognizant of the pain caused by my many bruises. I recoil at the disgusting liquid in which I was just submerged. I pray no predators or security personnel have me in their sights, as I am unarmed and defenseless. My iPad buzzed in my backpack. Apparently, this is enough of a moment of peace for my father to demand another write-up, and it seems that the waterproof case protected it well enough to make that possible. I look around, hoping that my friends were as lucky as I was and have also survived the fall, but I have yet to spot any of them, or the remaining hunter Joe had tackled on B1. It takes me a moment to grasp what B3 Plaza consists of, the last thing I expected, a massive shopping mall. One now filled with debris and a murky river of floating bodies.